The text message arrived at 9:47 p.m. just as I was settling into my recliner with a beer and the remote. Katie's name lit up my phone screen with words that should have been innocent enough. Staying at Monica's tonight, wine and spa, don't wait up. I stared at those words, something cold settling in my stomach. My wife of 12 years had never been the spontaneous spa type. Hell, she complained when I left wet towels on the bathroom floor, but suddenly she was up for an impromptu sleepover. Sure thing, honey, I muttered to the empty living room, setting my beer down harder than necessary. Katie Harper, my beautiful, ambitious, controlling wife, worked as HR director at TechFlow Solutions, a startup that had been consuming more and more of her time lately. She'd been coming home later, taking more work calls in her study, and showing a sudden interest in yoga pants and expensive perfume. Classic signs, really, but I'd been telling myself I was paranoid. The house felt different with her gone. Quieter, but not peaceful, more like the silence before a storm. I grabbed our shared laptop from the kitchen counter, telling myself I just wanted to check the weather. Katie had always been careless with passwords, using the same one for everything. Harper 2011, the year we bought the house. Her email was still logged in. The first thing I saw made my blood freeze. A confirmation from the Marriott downtown. Thank you for your reservation, miss. Harper. We look forward to welcoming you and Mr. Cruikshank to our executive suite. Ethan Cruikshank, her boss. The CEO with the perfect teeth and the BMW who'd been calling our house at odd hours for urgent work matters. My hand shook as I scrolled through more emails. Dinner reservations at restaurants I'd never been to, spa appointments for 2, a jewelry store receipt for a men's watch that definitely wasn't mine. Monica's house my ass, I whispered. I opened her WhatsApp backup, feeling like a criminal but unable to stop myself. The messages between Katie and her little circle of friends painted a picture that made me sick. Katie. Nick's working late again. Perfect timing. Monica. Girl, you're living dangerously. What if he finds out? Katie. He won't. He's too busy with his stupid tool shop to notice anything. Besides, Ethan makes me feel alive again. Zoe. Just be careful. Men like Nick can surprise you. Katie. Nick? Please. He couldn't surprise me if he tried. He's predictable as clockwork. I sat there in my kitchen, staring at my wife's words, feeling something dark and cold spreading through my chest. Predictable. That's what she thought of me. Nick Harper, the guy who fixed cars for 20 years before starting a small consulting business. The guy who remembered her coffee order and never forgot an anniversary. Predictable. My phone buzzed with a text from Katie. Having so much fun! Monica says hi. I looked at the Find My app. Katie's little dot was pulsing from the Marriott Hotel, not Monica's suburban house. Monica says hi, I repeated, taking a screenshot of her location. I bet she does. I spent the next hour going through everything. Bank statements showing charges at expensive restaurants on nights she'd claimed to be working late. Credit card bills for lingerie I'd never seen. A paper trail of lies stretching back months. The front door opened at 6:23 a.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a folder full of printed evidence, watching the sunrise through our bay window. Katie crept in like a teenager sneaking past curfew, her hair mussed and her makeup smudged. She froze when she saw me. Oh, you're up early, she said, trying to sound casual. I was just... Funny thing, I interrupted, my voice calm as glass. I just saw you book a hotel room with your boss. The color drained from her face. Wait, how did you... I slid the laptop across the table, showing her email confirmation. Oh, and Monica sends her regards. From the Marriott Executive Suite. Katie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For the first time in years, my predictable wife was speechless. I stood up, tucking the folder under my arm. We'll talk when you're ready to tell the truth. All of it. I walked out, leaving her standing in our kitchen like a statue, and drove to my tool shop. For the first time in months, I felt completely awake. My shop occupied a converted garage in the industrial district, filled with diagnostic equipment and the comfortable smell of motor oil and metal. It was my sanctuary, the one place Katie never bothered to visit because it was too dirty and loud. I called my old friend Rob Martinez, who ran a private security company after retiring from the police force. He answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly from 30 years of cigarettes. "Nick? Jesus, it's 7 in the morning. Someone better be dead." "My marriage is," I said. "I need advice." Rob arrived 20 minutes later with coffee and donuts, taking one look at my face and settling in for a long conversation. I showed him everything: the emails, the bank statements, the text messages between Katie and her friends. "Holy shit, Nick. She really did a number on you." Rob shook his head, studying the evidence. "You want to divorce her?" "I want to destroy her," I said quietly. "Her and her boss and every friend who helped her lie to me." Rob raised an eyebrow. "That's dark, even for you. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Katie's right about one thing. I am predictable, but maybe it's time to surprise her." We spent the morning planning. Rob's police background made him invaluable for understanding what I could and couldn't do legally. The key was public humiliation without crossing into criminal territory. First step: financial pressure. I changed every password on our joint accounts, effectively locking Katie out of our money. Then I called the credit card companies, reporting suspicious activity on Katie's cards. They were frozen within hours. "Bank fraud alert," I told Rob with grim satisfaction. Completely legitimate considering she's been using our joint card for her affair. Next, I moved everything valuable from our house to the shop. My tools, important documents, family heirlooms, even my grandfather's watch collection. If Katie wanted to play games, she could do it with an empty house. My phone rang constantly, Katie calling, texting, begging me to come home and talk. I ignored every message. At noon, I drove to Monica's house in the suburbs. Monica Chen lived in a pristine colonial with a perfect lawn and a minivan in the driveway. She was Katie's oldest friend, the one who'd supposedly been covering for my wife's affairs. Monica answered the door in yoga pants and a shocked expression. "Nick, what are you doing here?" "Thought I'd thank you personally for all those sleepovers with Katie," I said, pushing past her into the foyer. Must have been exhausting, covering for her hotel visits with Ethan. Monica's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" "Because I have screenshots of text messages where you're giving my wife advice about her affair. Want to see them?" I pulled out my phone, showing her the WhatsApp conversations. Monica's hands flew to her mouth. "Oh God! Nick, I'm so sorry. I told her it was wrong. I tried to talk her out of it. By helping her plan it. By giving her alibis." My voice was getting louder. "By laughing about how stupid and predictable I am." Monica started crying, which brought her husband Jeff running from the kitchen. He took one look at the situation and demanded to know what was going on. "Your wife's been helping mine cheat," I said simply. "Thought you should know." I left them arguing in their perfect foyer and drove to my next stop. TechFlow Solutions occupied 3 floors of a glass office building downtown. I'd been there exactly twice, once for Katie's company Christmas party and once to pick her up when her car was in the shop. The receptionist recognized me and waved me through to the elevator. Katie's office was on the 2nd floor, in the HR department. She was at her desk, frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to do damage control with Monica. She looked up when I knocked on her doorframe, her face a mask of panic and guilt. "Nick! You can't be here. This is my workplace." "Is Ethan in?" I asked conversationally. "I thought I'd introduce myself properly." "Please don't do this," Katie whispered. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." "You've been sleeping with your boss and lying to me about it for months. What's not to understand?" Katie's assistant, Zoe, looked up from her desk outside the office, her eyes wide. Other employees were starting to notice the commotion. "Where's his office?" I asked Zoe directly. "Top floor," she stammered. "But you need an appointment. I'll make an exception." Ethan Cruikshank's corner office was everything I'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive furniture, and a view of the city that probably cost more than my annual income. The man himself was on a conference call, gesturing at a wall-mounted screen while 3 other executives nodded along. He looked up when I walked in, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to something approaching fear. "I'll call you back," he told the screen, ending the call abruptly. "Nick, right? Katie's husband. What brings you here?" "Just wanted to thank you for taking such good care of my wife," I said, walking to his desk. The hotel receipts, the expensive dinners, the jewelry. Very generous. The other executives exchanged glances and quietly filed out of the office. Ethan's perfect composure was starting to crack. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." I pulled out a USB drive and set it on his desk. "That's got copies of everything. Emails, text messages, bank records. Your wife might find them interesting." Ethan went pale. "What do you want?" "Nothing from you. I just wanted you to know that the game's changed." I headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Ethan? Your wife Claire says hi. We had a lovely chat this morning." I hadn't actually talked to his wife yet, but the look on his face told me he believed it. Sometimes the best lies are the ones people expect to hear. Katie was waiting in my shop when I got back, sitting on a folding chair next to my workbench, with tears streaming down her face. She'd managed to get inside using the spare key I'd forgotten about. "You can't do this," she said without preamble. "You're destroying everything." "I'm not destroying anything," I replied, hanging my jacket on a hook. "I'm just sharing the truth." "Isn't honesty important in a marriage?" "This isn't honesty, it's revenge." "Maybe both." Katie stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "You froze my credit cards. I couldn't even buy lunch today. And Monica won't return my calls, and Jeff is asking questions. Good. Maybe Jeff deserves to know what kind of woman he's married to." "You bastard." Katie's voice was pure venom. "You think you're so righteous, but you're just a bitter small man who can't handle that his wife outgrew him." That stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "Outgrew me? Is that what you call sleeping with your boss?" "Ethan understands me. He appreciates what I bring to the table. He doesn't take me for granted like you do." "What does he bring to the table? Besides hotel rooms and expensive dinners?" Katie's face flushed. "He makes me feel special. Important. When I'm with him, I'm not just Nick Harper's wife who does laundry and grocery shopping. I'm Catherine Harper, a successful professional woman who deserves better than this." She gestured around my shop with disgust, and something inside me snapped. "Better than this? You mean better than the man who worked 60-hour weeks for 20 years to pay for your college degree? Better than the guy who supported you through 3 job changes and your mother's cancer treatment? Better than the husband who never forgot your birthday or anniversary, even when you forgot his? That's not. Better than the man who believed every lie you told him for months because he trusted you completely." My voice was rising. "Yeah, Katie, you definitely deserve better than that." She stared at me for a long moment, tears still flowing. "I never meant for it to happen. It just did." "Bullshit. Affairs don't just happen. You made choices. Every hotel reservation, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye and told me you loved me while you were planning your next rendezvous. Those were choices." Katie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What do you want from me?" "You want me to beg? Fine. I'm begging. Don't destroy my career. Don't ruin my friendships. I'll end it with Ethan. I'll go to counseling. Whatever you want." "It's too late for that." "Why?" "Because your precious ego is bruised. Because you called me predictable." The words came out quieter than I'd intended, but they hit Katie like a physical blow. Because you and your friends laughed about how stupid I was. Because you thought I was too pathetic to ever find out. Katie's face crumpled. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. And you were wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Rob. Package delivered to Mrs. Cruikshank. She seemed very interested in the contents. I smiled for the first time all day. Looks like Claire got her care package. Katie's eyes widened. You didn't. Photos, bank records, hotel receipts, everything. Amazing what you can find in public records if you know where to look. You're insane. Ethan will destroy you. With what? He's got more to lose than I do. Wife, kids, reputation, board of directors breathing down his neck. I'm just a predictable guy with a tool shop. Katie pulled out her phone, probably to warn Ethan, but I was already walking toward the door. Where are you going? To finish what you started. The Riverside Grill was Katie's favorite restaurant, the place where she and her friends met for their weekly girls' night out. I'd called ahead and reserved the back section, telling them I was planning a surprise party. Monica, Zoe, and Amanda, Katie's 3 closest friends and co-conspirators, were already there when I arrived at 7 p.m. They sat around a circular table, whispering frantically and checking their phones. They looked up when I approached, their faces a mixture of guilt and defiance. Nick, Monica said carefully, what are you doing here? I thought we should all have a conversation, I said, taking the empty chair across from them. About honesty. And friendship. And what happens when you help someone destroy a marriage. Zoe, Katie's assistant, spoke up first. Look, we know you're upset, but this is between you and Katie. Is it? Because according to these text messages, all 3 of you knew about the affair. All 3 of you helped her plan it. All 3 of you laughed about what a fool I was. I placed printed screenshots on the table, spreading them out like playing cards. The women stared at the evidence of their own words. Amanda, who worked in TechFlow's marketing department, tried to grab the papers. You can't just violate people's privacy like this. Privacy? You mean like the privacy of my marriage that you all helped destroy? We didn't destroy anything, Monica said, but her voice lacked conviction. Katie was unhappy. We just supported her. You supported her lies. There's a difference. The restaurant was filling up with the dinner crowd, and our conversation was starting to attract attention from nearby tables. Perfect. You want to know what's funny? I continued, my voice carrying just enough to reach the neighboring diners. My wife thinks I'm predictable. Boring. Too stupid to figure out she's been cheating on me for months. But you know what's really predictable? Women who think they're smarter than everyone else right up until they get caught. Keep your voice down, Zoe hissed. Why? Afraid people might hear the truth. That's when Katie burst through the restaurant's front door, her hair wild and her face flushed. She spotted our table and rushed over, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Nick, stop this right now. Stop what? Having dinner with your friends? Katie looked around the table, taking in the printed messages and the guilty expressions. You showed them? I showed them their own words. Interesting reading. Amanda pulled out her phone and started recording. This is harassment. We could call the police. Go ahead, I said. I'd love to explain to the officers how you all conspired to help a married woman cheat on her husband. I'm sure that would make great social media content. Amanda lowered her phone. Katie sat down heavily in the remaining chair. What do you want, Nick? What will it take for you to stop this? I want you to tell them the truth. All of it. No more lies, no more games. Tell them what you really think of me and what you really think of them. I'm not doing this here. Then we'll do it somewhere else. But we're doing it. That's when Ethan Cruikshank walked into the restaurant, his face grim and his expensive suit wrinkled. He looked around until he spotted our table, then approached with the careful steps of a man walking to his execution. Katie, we need to talk. Not now, Ethan. Yes, now. He glanced at me with pure hatred. Your husband sent my wife photos. She's filing for divorce. The entire table went silent. Katie's face went white. She's taking the kids to her mother's house tonight, Ethan continued. My lawyer says she'll get half of everything, including my stake in the company. Congratulations, Nick. You've destroyed 2 families. I didn't destroy anything, I said calmly. I just shared the truth. If the truth destroys your family, maybe you should have thought about that before you started sleeping with my wife. The words carried across the restaurant, and conversations at nearby tables stopped. Ethan's face turned red. You have no idea what you've done. The board is meeting tomorrow morning. They're talking about removing me as CEO. 20 years of building this company gone. Good, I said. Maybe they'll promote someone who doesn't sleep with their employees. Ethan lunged across the table, grabbing for my shirt, but I was ready for him. I stood up quickly, letting his momentum carry him past me, and he crashed into an empty chair. The restaurant erupted in murmurs and pointing fingers. You crazy bastard! Ethan scrambled to his feet, his perfect hair mussed and his face twisted with rage. I'll sue you for everything you have. With what money? Your wife's taking half, remember? And I doubt the board will be generous with your severance package. That's when Katie finally broke down completely. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed, her shoulders shaking with each breath. Her 3 friends sat frozen, unsure whether to comfort her or distance themselves. This is all wrong, Katie whispered through her tears. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? I asked. Were you planning to leave me for him? Or just keep lying indefinitely? Katie looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I don't know. I felt trapped, like my whole life was planned out and I had no say in it. Ethan made me feel free. Free to lie and cheat and betray the people who loved you. Free to be someone other than Nick Harper's wife. The restaurant had gone completely quiet now, everyone listening to our public breakdown. I looked around at the faces, some sympathetic, some judgmental, all fascinated by the drama unfolding at table 12. Well, congratulations, I said finally. You're not Nick Harper's wife anymore. The divorce papers were filed on a Tuesday morning in October, exactly 6 weeks after that night at the Riverside Grill. I'd hired the best attorney I could afford, a sharp woman named Patricia Wells who specialized in cases involving adultery and financial deception. Katie tried to fight it, of course. She wanted half of everything, including my business and the house we'd bought together. But Patricia had done her homework. The evidence of Katie's affair, combined with her use of joint funds to finance it, gave us significant leverage. Adultery is still grounds for divorce in this state, Patricia explained during one of our meetings. And the fact that she used marital assets to conduct the affair works in your favor. The judge won't look kindly on that. Meanwhile, Katie's world continued to collapse. Ethan had been forced to resign as CEO of TechFlow after the board learned about his affair with an employee. The company faced potential lawsuits and HR violations, and Ethan's reputation in the tech industry was destroyed. His wife Claire had indeed filed for divorce and was seeking primary custody of their 2 children. Katie's friendships didn't survive either. Monica's marriage was on the rocks after Jeff learned about her role in covering up the affair. Zoe had been transferred to a different department at TechFlow to avoid the gossip and drama. Amanda had actually posted the video from the restaurant confrontation on social media, where it went viral locally, making Katie and Ethan minor celebrities for all the wrong reasons. The house felt different with Katie gone. She'd moved into a small apartment across town, taking only her clothes and personal items. I'd changed the locks and the security codes, reclaiming the space that had been ours for 12 years. On the day our divorce was finalized, I was in my shop working on a diagnostic computer when Rob stopped by with coffee and news. Heard from my buddy at the police station, he said, settling into his usual chair. Ethan Cruikshank got arrested last night. For what? DUI, crashed his BMW into a mailbox outside his old house. Claire called it in, said he'd been drinking and trying to convince her to take him back. I shook my head. Pathetic. Gets better. Katie was in the car with him. That stopped me cold. What? Yep, both of them drunk, both of them crying, both of them blaming you for ruining their lives. The responding officer said it was the saddest thing he'd ever seen. I thought about that for a moment. Katie and Ethan, two people who'd thought they were so smart, so sophisticated, so much better than predictable old Nick Harper, reduced to drunk driving and public meltdowns. You know what's funny? I said finally. I don't feel sorry for them. I thought I would, but I don't. Why should you? They made their choices. Katie always said I was too nice, too forgiving, too predictable. I took a sip of coffee. Maybe she was right about the first two. Rob laughed. You're not the same guy you were 6 months ago, that's for sure. He was right. The man who'd sat in his kitchen reading those text messages, feeling sorry for himself and wondering what he'd done wrong, was gone. In his place was someone harder, more calculating, less willing to trust or forgive. The settlement hearing was held on a gray November morning in family court. Katie showed up with a public defender. She couldn't afford a private attorney anymore, while I sat next to Patricia with our carefully organized evidence. Judge Morrison was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, who'd clearly seen every variation of marital drama. She reviewed our case files with professional detachment, occasionally asking questions or requesting clarification. Mrs. Harper, she said finally, you're seeking 50% of marital assets, including the family home and your husband's business. On what grounds? Katie's lawyer, a young man who looked fresh out of law school, stood up nervously. Your Honor, my client contributed to the marriage through her career and domestic support. And by conducting an extramarital affair using joint funds, Judge Morrison interrupted, consulting her notes. I see charges for hotels, restaurants, and gifts that clearly weren't for the benefit of the marriage. Katie's face flushed red. She whispered something to her lawyer, who shook his head. Your Honor, Patricia said, standing up smoothly, we're prepared to offer Mrs. Harper 20% of liquid assets, excluding the home and business, in exchange for a clean break. No alimony, no further claims. It was a generous offer, considering the circumstances. Katie would walk away with enough money to start over, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. Judge Morrison looked at Katie. Mrs. Harper, do you accept this settlement? Katie stared at me across the courtroom, her eyes filled with something between hatred and regret. For a moment, I thought she might reject the offer and drag us through a trial, but her lawyer whispered something in her ear and she nodded. I accept. Very well, divorce granted. Just like that, 12 years of marriage were officially over. Outside the courthouse, Katie caught up with me as I was walking to my truck. Nick, wait! I turned around. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by everything that had happened. I know you hate me, she said, and I know I deserve it. But I need you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. What did you mean for Katie? How was this supposed to end? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I guess I thought you'd never find out. That I could have both lives. Your mistake was thinking I was too stupid to figure it out. You weren't stupid. You were trusting, and I took advantage of that. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for all of it. You deserved better. Yes, I said simply. I did. Katie nodded and walked away, her heels clicking on the courthouse steps. I watched her get into a beat-up Honda Civic, a far cry from the BMW she used to drive, and disappear into traffic. That evening, I was cleaning out the last of Katie's belongings from the house when I found a photo album tucked behind some books in her study. It was filled with pictures from our early years together, our wedding, our first apartment, vacations and holidays, and ordinary moments that had seemed important enough to preserve. I flipped through the pages, looking at younger versions of ourselves. Katie in her wedding dress, radiant and hopeful. Me in my army dress uniform, proud and confident. Both of us believing we'd found something that would last forever. At the back of the album was a note in Katie's handwriting, dated just after our 5th anniversary. To my wonderful husband, thank you for making every day an adventure. I can't wait to see what the next 5 years bring. Love always, Kay. I stared at those words for a long time, trying to reconcile them with the woman who'd betrayed me so completely. When had that hopeful young bride turned into someone who could lie so easily? When had love always become until something better comes along? I closed the album and put it in the box with the rest of her things. My phone rang as I was loading the last box into my truck. It was Patricia with news about Ethan. He pled guilty to the DUI, she said, lost his license for 6 months and got probation. But that's not the interesting part. What's the interesting part? TechFlow is being investigated by the State Labor Board for workplace harassment and discrimination. Apparently, your wife wasn't Ethan's first affair with an employee. They found 3 other women willing to testify about inappropriate conduct. I felt a grim satisfaction at that news. Katie had thought she was special, that her relationship with Ethan was unique and meaningful. Instead, she'd just been the latest in a series of conquests. What happens now? Civil lawsuits, probably. The company's insurance won't cover intentional misconduct, so Ethan could be personally liable for damages. He's looking at financial ruin. After I hung up, I drove to the storage unit where I'd put Katie's belongings. As I unloaded the boxes, I thought about the chain of events that had led us here. Katie's affair, my discovery, the confrontations and revelations that had destroyed not just our marriage, but multiple families and careers. All because my wife had thought I was too predictable to fight back. The next morning, I woke up in my empty house and made coffee for one. The silence that had once felt oppressive now seemed peaceful. I had my life back, scarred and changed, but entirely my own. I drove to the shop and opened for business as usual. Around noon, a woman in her 30s came in with a troubled expression and a Honda that was making strange noises. My ex-husband used to handle all the car stuff, she explained as I looked under the hood. I have no idea what I'm doing. That's what I'm here for, I said, diagnosing a simple belt replacement. We'll get you taken care of. As I worked on her car, she told me about her divorce, her struggles with being suddenly single, her fears about starting over. I listened without judgment, offering practical advice when she asked for it. You're very kind, she said when I finished the repair. I was expecting to get ripped off, honestly. Most mechanics see a woman alone and assume she's an easy mark. Not all of us, I said. She paid her bill and left with a smile, and I realized something had shifted inside me. The anger that had sustained me through the divorce was finally beginning to fade, replaced by something more like acceptance. Katie had been wrong about me in more ways than one. I wasn't just predictable, I was reliable. I wasn't just boring, I was steady. I wasn't just trusting, I was honorable. Those weren't weaknesses to be ashamed of. They were strengths to build on. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. This is Claire Cruikshank. I wanted to thank you for opening my eyes about my husband. The divorce will be final next month. I hope you're doing well. I texted back, I'm doing fine. I hope you and your kids are too. A few minutes later, we are. It's scary starting over, but also liberating. I feel like I can breathe again. I understood exactly what she meant. 6 months later, I was having dinner at the Riverside Grill, the same restaurant where I'd confronted Katie and her friends. I'd become a regular there, enjoying the food and the atmosphere without the weight of deception hanging over me. I was reading the news on my phone when I overheard a familiar voice from across the restaurant. Katie was there with a man I didn't recognize, their conversation tense and hushed. I can't keep doing this, the man was saying. My wife is getting suspicious. Just give me a little more time, Katie replied. I'm working on getting my own place, somewhere we can be together properly. I shook my head and went back to my dinner. Some people never learned. As I was paying my bill, Katie spotted me and approached my table. She looked older, worn down by the consequences of her choices. Hello, Nick. Katie. How are you doing? Better than expected. You? She glanced back at her companion, who was checking his phone nervously. I'm managing. Starting over isn't easy. No, I agreed. It's not. I heard you're doing well. The business is growing. It is. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment, two people who'd once shared everything and now had nothing to say to each other. I should go, Katie said finally. My friend is waiting. Married friend? I asked quietly. Katie's face flushed, but she didn't deny it. Some habits are hard to break. Some people are hard to fix. She walked back to her table without another word. I left the restaurant and drove home to my quiet house, feeling something like pity for the woman who'd once been my wife. A year after our divorce was finalized, I ran into Monica at the grocery store. She looked embarrassed when she saw me, but I nodded politely and continued shopping. Nick, she called out as I was loading my cart. Can I talk to you for a minute? I waited while she approached, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the wedding ring that was no longer on her finger. I wanted to apologize, she said, for my part in everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I regret it. How's Jeff? I asked. We're divorced. He couldn't get past the lying, the betrayal of trust. I don't blame him. She shifted uncomfortably. I haven't spoken to Katie in months. After everything fell apart, our friendship just ended. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Really? I thought about it. Yeah, actually, I am. I never wanted to destroy everyone's life. I just wanted the truth to come out. Monica nodded. The truth has a way of doing that, doesn't it? Destroying things, I mean. Only things that were built on lies. She left without saying goodbye, and I finished my shopping in peace. 2 years later, I was closing up the shop when Claire Cruikshank stopped by. She looked healthy and confident, a far cry from the devastated woman I'd helped expose her husband's infidelity to. I hope you don't mind me stopping by, she said. I was in the neighborhood and wanted to thank you again. How are you doing? Really well, actually. The kids and I moved to Portland last year. I got a job with a nonprofit and we're all much happier. She smiled. Ethan sees them every other weekend when he can afford the plane ticket. How is he? Broke, mostly. The lawsuits from his other victims bankrupted him. He's working as a sales manager for a software company now, making about 1/10 of what he used to earn. She shrugged. I can't say I feel sorry for him. And Katie? I heard she moved to Florida. Apparently, she married some guy she met online, but it didn't last long. He divorced her after 6 months when he found out she was cheating. I wasn't surprised. Katie had never learned that happiness couldn't be found in someone else's bed. What about you? Claire asked. Are you seeing anyone? Not seriously. I'm still figuring out who I am as a single man. That's probably wise. Trust is hard to rebuild once it's been shattered. She was right about that. I'd dated a few women over the past 2 years, but I found myself constantly looking for signs of deception, analyzing every word and gesture for hidden meanings. It was exhausting and unfair to them, so I'd mostly focused on work and rebuilding my life. Well, I should go, Claire said, but I'm glad I got to see you. You look good, Nick. Happy. I am happy, I realized as I said it. For the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy. After she left, I locked up the shop and drove home through the quiet streets of our small city. The house that had once felt empty now felt peaceful. I'd redecorated, removing the last traces of my life with Katie and creating something that was entirely mine. I made dinner for one, watched a movie I'd chosen, and went to bed without checking anyone else's schedule or worrying about anyone else's mood. It was a simple life, but it was honest. And predictable? Maybe. But I'd learned that predictability wasn't the insult Katie had meant it to be. Predictability meant reliability, consistency, trustworthiness. It meant being the kind of person others could depend on. Katie had thrown all of that away for excitement and passion and the thrill of forbidden romance. Where had it gotten her? Divorced twice, friendless, and apparently unable to maintain an honest relationship with anyone. Meanwhile, I'd built a successful business, maintained my integrity, and found peace in solitude. I'd learned that revenge wasn't about destroying your enemies, it was about refusing to let them destroy you. The last I heard of Katie was from Rob, who'd run into her at a casino outside the city. She'd been alone, drinking too much, and complaining to anyone who would listen about how her ex-husband had ruined her life. She looked rough, Rob told me. Like someone who'd made a lot of bad choices and was still making them. I felt a flicker of the old anger, but it passed quickly. Katie's problems were no longer my concern. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. On a warm spring evening 3 years after our divorce, I was having dinner on my back deck when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Katie's name, and for a moment I considered not answering. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Katie." "Nick." Her voice was slurred, and I could hear bar noise in the background. "I wanted to call and tell you something." "What's that?" "You won. Okay? You won. Are you happy now?" "I'm not sure what you mean. Don't play dumb." "You destroyed my life, my career, my friendships, everything. And now I'm sitting in some shitty bar in Tampa, drinking alone on my birthday, with no money and no prospects, and no one who gives a damn about me." She was crying now. "So congratulations, Nick. You got your revenge." I was quiet for a long moment, listening to her sob into the phone. "Katie," I said finally, "I didn't destroy your life." "You did. Every choice you made, every lie you told, every person you betrayed, that was all you. I just refused to pretend it didn't happen. You could have forgiven me. You could have given me another chance. Could I? After months of lies? After you called me predictable and stupid? After you used our money to finance your affair?" I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "Some things can't be forgiven, Katie. Some trust can't be rebuilt. So, that's it? I'm supposed to suffer forever for one mistake. It wasn't one mistake. It was hundreds of them, made over months. And you're not suffering because I won't forgive you. You're suffering because you keep making the same choices." The line went quiet, except for the background noise of the bar. "I loved you once," Katie said finally. "I know. I loved you too. But love isn't enough when it's not accompanied by respect and honesty. I'm sorry, Nick. For all of it. I know it doesn't matter now, but I am sorry. It does matter, and I forgive you, Katie. Not for your sake, but for mine." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat on my deck for a long time after that call, watching the sunset and thinking about the path that had brought me here. Katie was right about one thing. I had won. But not in the way she meant. I'd won my self-respect back. I'd won my independence. I'd won the right to live honestly, without lies or deception or betrayal. I'd won a life that was entirely my own. And yes, I'd gotten my revenge. Not through elaborate schemes or public humiliation, though there had been some of that, but simply by refusing to let Katie's betrayal destroy me, by building something better from the wreckage of our marriage. The predictable man she'd underestimated had surprised her in the end, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming more fully himself. 5 years later, I was a different man living a different life. My business had expanded to include 3 locations and a dozen employees. I'd bought a larger house in a better neighborhood. I'd even started dating again, carefully, slowly, but with genuine hope for the future. I never saw Katie again. though I heard occasional updates through the small-town gossip network. She'd moved back to our city, working as a receptionist at a dental office and living in a studio apartment. She'd apparently given up on marriage and relationships entirely, focusing instead on staying sober and trying to rebuild some connection with her family. I wished her well, in an abstract sort of way. Not because I'd forgiven her, though I had, but because holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. On the 5th anniversary of our divorce, I was having dinner at the Riverside Grill when the hostess approached my table. "Excuse me, Mr. Harper? There's a woman at the bar who asked me to give you this." She handed me a folded napkin with a message written in familiar handwriting. "Thank you for teaching me that actions have consequences. I hope you're happy." I looked toward the bar, but Katie was already gone. Through the window, I saw her walking down the street alone, her shoulders straight and her pace steady. She looked sober and purposeful, like someone who'd finally learned from her mistakes. I folded the napkin and put it in my wallet, next to the business cards and receipts and other debris of daily life. It seemed like an appropriate place for the final word in our story, tucked away but not forgotten, a reminder of where I'd been and how far I'd come. The waiter brought my check, and I paid it with cash, leaving a generous tip. Outside, the evening air was warm and full of possibility. I walked to my truck, started the engine, and drove home to my quiet house and my honest life. Predictable? Maybe. But it was a good life, built on truth and earned through struggle. And in the end, that was revenge enough.